Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, Emergency Preparedness Q&A with our Contemporary Issues expert. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Glukuho Contemporary Issues Committee, and my name is Jeremy Alexander. I'm the tech coordinator, and I'm hosted at Eastern Illinois University, and I'll serve as the moderator for today's webinar. Before we begin the webinar, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items with you to maximize your learning for this session. To ask questions, type in the Q&A section. If you have any, to answer the questions as quick as possible, but if you want to ensure enough time for all the materials for our presenters. Should you experience any problems, please type in a check marks and we'll work to assist you with that. At the end of the session, a presentation and a recording of the session will be hosted on glukuho.org under the webinar archive section for your future reference. We encourage you to share this resource with your colleagues who are unable to attend. Right now, I hand it over to Jake from the Contemporary Issues Committee and Stacey, or CIE, to get us started today.
All right, good morning, everyone. I saw in the chat box that it looked like there was some echoing. Is that still going on right now? Okay, fantastic. Glad to hear that. Well, and again, good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see you all here on our call this morning. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you all Stacey Renker from The Ohio State University. Stacey is our contemporary issues expert and will be joining us at the annual conference at in East Lansing, Michigan at Michigan State University. And so today is just simply you all that have asked some questions. We've prepared them in a little PowerPoint presentation, and as Stacey goes through, she will be sharing her insight on that. And then at the end of this, if you have any questions that are left unanswered, please feel free to ask them in the chat box, and we'll be more than happy to answer those questions in the best manner possible. Okay, and so without further ado, Stacey, let's go ahead and let's get started.
Great, thanks. So what do I like to do for fun? Well, a little bit about myself in general is my area of interest, area of focus at the university is risk management and emergency management. I've been at Ohio State now about 20 years. I started off as a student employee and was one of those folks who were really left. I am the crazy risk manager who likes to burn off stress with my husband that rides on the back of a motorcycle and ride on the back of a motorcycle. I love nothing more during the summer to be able to do those kinds of things and enjoy time with him to be able to do those different things. I love going to concerts over the summer. We go to a variety of different wine festivals. Anything we can do to kind of burn off stress and have fun as a family and with friends are definitely parts of the fun we like to have in our lives. The echo is on my computer. Let me see what I can do. Does that make me any better? No. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say we're not having as much echo on our end either. Perfect. So how do I stay informed with new trends and practices? So very similar to you guys, my professional organization. I think one of the things I was really lucky, my mom was a professor of nursing, and she really preached to me the value of professional development and professional organizations and how really key they are to not only your lifelong learning opportunities, but to the connections and the ways to stay on top of your profession. And as a result of that, I work with, I'm actually serving here as the chair. I work my professional organization that I most currently close affiliate with is the International Association of Emergency Managers. Within that organization, there is a university and college caucus. There is 375 members, largely from the United States and Canada, and I'm currently serving as the chair of that organization. It was a 3-year stint of secretary, vice chair, chair, and one of the things that I get from that is national support. It's anything and everything that I have a question about, I can go out to any of those individuals. I'm on a few different listservs, another listserv called the Disaster Resilient University. That is a great listserv for me to stay up on trends. People will post current events on there, as well as they will also post just questions. We have this issue on our campus. What are you guys doing? So very similar to many of the groups that you guys are affiliated with, I choose higher ed specific ones within emergency management. So that's where I feel the most value. As a result of that, I probably know people at most of your institutions. And that I feel blessed about, because I think that's going to make me a great asset as I continue to talk to different departments across the university, knowing those individuals, being able to help make those connections for you. What words of wisdom do I have for young professionals in their first or second year? Hang in there. I think that one of the biggest things as it relates to my duties and how I interact with them is if we always expect things to expect the unexpected, things gonna happen. I think that my perspective from a risk management as well as emergency management perspective is if we think our careers in higher education are going to include absolutely no emergencies or problems, we're not in the right field. They are inevitable. What we can best plan for is how we are going to respond to them, prepare to them, and then most importantly, from my perspective, learn from them. So I think I would tell our new young professionals, other than hang in there, expect the unexpected, and that's okay. As our administrators know that life is going to happen and problems are going to happen, our jobs aren't necessarily to prevent. We can't prevent everything. So go with it and learn from it will probably be some of my best advice for them. Why did I choose career in emergency preparedness and management? And would I recommend a professional interested in the area to help? What would I recommend to get you started? So weird. So not to divulge my age to the crowd, but I graduated college before 9/11. And 9/11 was the time frame for emergency management to really go on a national landscape. Before, when I was in college, I had this dream of working for FEMA. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And there really was only about 15 emergency management programs across the country at that time. And Ohio State did not offer one and still does not offer one, as a matter of fact. So I found the next best major that I thought would lead me to there, and there was a major in our school at that time that was called Family and Community Service. How do you take people and things and apply them to problems? Which to me was fun, right? I thought it was a great parallel to that. And so that's what I did. After 9/11, obviously the field exploded. Lots more professional development programs and those different pieces. I would recommend as a professional interested in this area, explore the different options that you have. There are so many different free training opportunities for staff to take advantage of, and you don't have to be an emergency manager. FEMA offers the independent study series online on their website, where any professional can go and take online some basic emergency management classes. And I recommend classes such as 100, 200, 700, and 800. Those are the 4 cornerstones to emergency management. What those will help professionals do who are working with folks that are working with more serious emergencies, you'll get to know their lingo and how they operate. I think that's a great base piece to being able to learn. If I'm already in my profession, I'm not going to go back to school. How do I find to spend some time in those areas? I think that the other things I would recommend to a professional interested in this area is to meet people outside of your area. And I think that you need to expand the knowledge of the different people you're working with. So meet with somebody that's not traditionally somebody in your wheelhouse that has something to do with safety on our campus and forge that friendship. I think that for me, I ended up getting to where I'm at because when I first started, was hired at university, I was hired in a facilities role. And my job was to manage service contracts, which meant I got to learn a lot about everything and a lot of different people. That is what has fed me to where I am today. Those are the contacts that I have to ask for favors on behalf of student life and all of those different pieces. So I encourage you to be able to get out and find those people that take advantage of the training opportunities that are out there. They exist in order to get you where you need to be. This is a good question. I've seen plans that are very detail-oriented, prescribing each specific step to take. I've also seen more general plans that are intentionally vague to allow freedom to tailor the response. What are the pros and cons to each, and do you recommend one method over the other? So I'm not your traditional risk manager, because does your traditional risk manager ride on the back of her husband's motorcycle fund? Probably not. Generally when I do housing training every year with our residents like that, I show a slide where I talk about all of the different plans we have at the university for our facilities, building emergency action plans, comprehensive emergency management, business continuity plans. We have so many different acronyms for plans. And then I have a slide that says, one of my favorite quotes was, plans are meaningless, planning is essential. And for me, that embodies the best part of plans. So plans are, I don't want to say they're meaningless. They are helpful. Great reference documents when the person before you, or a great thing for somebody to leave to somebody who is coming after you. I think that their guidance is for what they want. But for me, the best part of developing plans is sitting in the room with others and developing them and talking through the issues and coming to the conclusion. Without a doubt, I gain more from that. My building emergency action plans that we have for our buildings, they're good, they're not bad, but the conversations that we had to take them so that our staff was aware of what was going on in the building, how do those things work, they were by far more meaningful than that piece of paper at the end. So I would tell you to embrace both, but I will tell you to enjoy the process. I think that there are pros and cons to each. I think for me, the cons to incredibly detailed plans is that for me, I have never found one emergency in housing to replicate it in the future in exactly the same manner. It just doesn't happen. There's always a little nuance that is different. It happens at a different time of day, so you have a different amount of. I always like to think about when I think about our friends in housing is the fun things don't happen at 9 o'clock in the morning. They happen on a Saturday at 3 a.m. when nobody else is around. The plans that a lot of people develop are based upon, it's a sunny day, the weather is warm, everybody's here, nobody's sick. So how do we make sure that the plans that we have aren't so specific that they allow people the freedom to be able to make the decisions they need to do? I do think the specific plans that do need to be included are things like resources that are available and how do you acquire those. So those could be key phone numbers. Those could be a reminder of things like our campus bus system is available to use if we need to shelter at night and it's cold. So those different things that are teaching people different options that they have available to be able to plug and play into what they need. That's my thoughts. There's a whole bunch of thoughts out there. What are some of the best practices in terms of training staff on emergency procedures in such a way that they are fresh and accessible in an emergency? So one of the things I recommend for our residents and staff when I do training is I encourage them on how to keep safety, how to build a culture of safety. For me, that's what it's really about. It's not about throwing things in people's faces. It's about building that culture so that it's inherent, so that you don't have to talk about it, so that it doesn't have to be obvious. For some of our members, it's helpful for it to be specific and obvious. So one of the ways we do that, and I encourage them to do, is that in every staff meeting, there should be something about safety. You have to call it safety. It could be you making a specific part and saying, we're going to take a safety second, or here's our safety special thing of the week, and you have a dedicated item to that. Or it could be hidden and sliding it in and knowing that it's in there so that you're building that culture. So as an example, I encourage all of our residence life directors to do things like talk about that first fire alarm and evacuation. How did it go? Talk about with your staff what went well, what didn't go well. Same thing with medical emergencies. Talk about this. So when we can talk about things like medical emergencies with our staff without giving away privacy issues of our residents and making sure that we're preserving that, but being able to talk about it from a lessons learned perspective. What did we do well? What tools do we need to do it better next time? I think those are great ways to learn from your examples and to keep it fresh in your meeting. It could also be talking about, hey, October is not, or September was now brand new Collegiate Fire Safety Month. You know, who remembers what the #1 cause of nuisance alarms in our residence halls? It could be just that, and bringing it as simple back to that in your staff meetings to make sure they are fresh and accessible. There are continually going to be things throughout the years that you as residents life staff are going to be aware that are trends. That could be theft, and uptick in theft from your residence hall. That could be tailgating issues, and by tailgating I mean the people who come in behind the others who may cause problems. It could be being observant of the fact that maybe your desk staff isn't following the procedures for guests that you want to have. How are you continually building that in without necessarily shoving it in people's faces so that it's always a part of what you're doing? How should student leaders and new professional staff be trained in emergency management? Should they be trained in a specific way other than reading the document? So again, these are the Stacey Renker opinions only, okay? This is not some sort of nationally prescribed thing. In my opinion, yes, I believe that they need to do way more than just reading documents. I believe that they, especially at training time for our resident advisors and for our professional staff, any of our professional staff, it is like drinking from the fire hose. There is so much information thrown at them that they can't possibly, if I'm going to say safety is of paramount importance at our university, and here's this document that I want you to read amongst the 4 other weeks of training that you have now just gone through. What kind of a message are we sending to our staff, whether they're our student staff or our professional staff, about that? We actually do at Ohio State, I spend 3 hours with, at one session. I know it sounds ultimately painful, but I do spend 3 hours with our hall directors, assistant hall directors, and our student office managers. They get 3 hours with me where we go over everything from our general building emergencies, and we talk through these things. I point out where the plans are located, and I provide them a toolbox and a shared drive that is a large folder that's called Safety Information from Safety, where I reference all of these documents for them to have. We do everything from biohazard spills, so I invite our environmental services to talk about what are the ways to touch on it, to tornadoes, to suspicious packages, we talk about what's going on in our community around us. We're in a large urban environment. We talk about those things. And it gives our professional staff a long amount of time. I also spend with our RA staff, myself and another gentleman, we do an hour building by buildings training with our RAs on general building emergencies as well as evacuation. And we set off the fire alarm. There is nothing that makes it more real in my mind to have them trained with the scream of a fire alarm going off behind my head. I think that makes it more real. The feedback we've received and has been much better since started doing it in that manner. But more importantly, when I read through incident reports, I'm able to see our RA staff are very much in line following the procedures that we've set for them. I love it when I hear and I read an incident report, the exact verbiage they're using from training, because they're retaining it. Why? More than likely because they used it. So those are my opinions as far as how I think it's best. I think it's always best to get in there. And when I train with when we train with the RA staff, that is literally me sitting on the floor in a circle with our RAs, just talking to them for an hour straight. And then we do a half-hour fire and evacuation. We have found methods work really well for us to have a conversation about safety and not as much lecturing to them. What protocols do you have for incidents where halls are evacuated? What instructions do you provide professional staff versus student staff? So what protocols do we have for incidents where halls are evacuated? So we provide our halls a couple of different things. We have, well, obviously our directions are to follow the fire department's orders. If the all building alarm is going off, people need to be out of the building. High-rise buildings, so that means floor on, floor below, and floor above, are typically evacuated for our zone evacuation. So we talk a lot about making sure that we're following within those. However, one of the most popular questions I get asked is about accountability. Do we kick off our students as they come back in the hall, or do any sort of verification that they are okay once they evacuated? No, we do not. We have some buildings that have as many as 1,500 students. And because the natures of our residence halls and our policies that relates to them coming and going, there's no checking in and out, guest policies, we've not found it to be a very effective way to spend our time. Now, have we ever done that? Absolutely. We've had some significant issues. We had a significant fire, one of our regional campuses. We had a flood, which resulted in us having to shelter 1,800 students. We did have our RAs reach out. I will tell you from experience, most of them are gone. Most of them aren't there. They hear the bells, they head out to McDonald's, they head out to the library, they head out to a friend's house, or they were already gone. So it's a much easier, more effective way for us to do things like a head count. As far as instructions that we provide for professional staff versus student staff, Jeremy, if you want to show the next slide. One of the things I encourage our directors to do is to make their own overall evacuation plan for the building. And by plan, I don't mean how do you edit and where do you go. That's my job. What I mean is, what are the roles you want your resident advisors to play within your facility? I've always found it to be easier for people to be able to make a call based upon their staff. So this is an example of one plan that a hall director gave me with the University of Dayton, Paul. But this is an example of things that they have created within themselves that I approve of, that they start off the year with and thinking, how are they going to support the evacuation? So we have that as part of the extension, and there's an expectation that the hall directors are going over that with the staff. The other thing that we do provide is we do provide go boxes. Several years ago, we started putting large Rubbermaid bins, and they have things in them like the Mylar blankets, glow sticks. It does have a bullhorn, flashlight. We also do have a clipboard in there that has sheets on it that has contact information, has some basic information about emergencies, as well as some departmental information. And those are pre-positioned in every single residence hall that we have. The idea is not, though, that that hall is going to be taking that with them as they go. The idea is that they know, not hall specific. The idea is that they know they can go to their neighbor hall and grab it. I never want to encourage anybody to go running back into the building to get something that they feel like they need for an evacuation. Most of the time, the greatest thing I love about residence life staff is talk about a team. One person has an issue, everybody else is going to step up and help. So that is why we have those different systems in place. Most commonly stolen items are glow sticks. Those are most common items I have to replace at the end of the year. And the bullhorn, I do encourage our staff to use it for things other than evacuations. so that when it becomes to an evacuation or a time when we need it, it works. I know they seem weird, but there have been some programming things where they've wanted to use them. I'm fine with that. I more care that it's not stolen or missing at the end of the year, but I'd rather have them be comfortable with using it. What process do you have for allowing students back into buildings for an evacuation, or your process is different for if there was damage to the hall versus if there wasn't any damage? So I talked a little bit about accountability and verifying our students a little bit. We follow the directions of the fire department for letting people back in. When we had issues in places, what we've typically done is most of the time those students have been pretty easily identified as they're coming out of the building. So we will typically put them in a separate location so that we can gather them in order to give them additional information and or have a chance to take a look at the space before we're bringing that back in. I will tell you my number one lesson learned as a young professional is the first time you re-enter space after a fire, don't bring the resident with you. Go first yourself and know what you're looking at. Made that mistake once. Don't recommend it for anybody else. A lot of the times you're going to go back in and be like, it smells like burnt popcorn, or it just smells bad, or there's a little bit of residue here. It will give you a better idea. There are times where the fire department may have made a mess, or sprinklers do amazing things to buildings. Like, the fire is minimal, the sprinkler damage is extreme. And so what does that look like? So I highly encourage you to make sure that you have taken a look and gotten your eyes on that space so you can help appropriately prepare the resident for when they go back in. For us, we utilize STARS, so we do have quite a bit of information on residents. I do encourage our hall staff to make sure that they are looking at that to see if there's any specific medical information or other information provided self-disclosed on there that is helpful to know and back in. I have had residents have panic attacks at the scene and other things where taking the second to know in advance and help them prepare makes me much more support to our residents in the long run. What technology or tools do you have available for assisting with evacuation? So I talked about the go boxes. Those are probably our biggest ones. We don't do the whole walkie-talkie thing. We are on a Mark's radio system for campus. It's a whole long, confusing story, but we do not utilize the walkie-talkie system. Our police have them, and that's what we utilize for that. Several of our hall staff participate in, we use, believe it or not, the number one way we communicate with our residents is GroupMe or WhatsApp or something like that. We generally will reach out to staff, even our RA staff, in those methods to be able to let them know what our primary method of communication will be. As an example, we have taken, when we had our flood in Park Shirley, and we ended up with 18 students out the first night and 1,100 for the week. Our primary method of communication was going to be email for how we were going to email updates to them. It is a miracle if you can get any college student to routinely check their email. So what we did was we reached out to all of our students via their RA, via the GroupMe, and told them updates are going to be coming to you via email. You actually have to check it. So that was incredibly effective at getting people updated that way as well. We don't do the food items. We just depend upon our dining services as far as being the folks that we can contact and access. We're fortunate, large university. For people who are contracting out, I would encourage you, if your food service is a contracted out service, I would encourage for you to have a relationship with those individuals in order to know how their emergency services are conducted. Every single, I have not come across a privately contracted dining service that didn't have some sort of clause in it for emergency supplies. So making sure that they're able to fill food orders within 24 hours, and then what can you get on judgment? So immediate, we call it on judgment, but at immediate request. But those are probably the big things that we do have. We don't utilize the laptops at the front desk, the walkie-talkies. Technology-wise, the other thing that we will use is our emergency notification system for the university. So our we call Buckeye Alert. We have the ability to zone in on a building if we needed to and send them out text messages. Have we used that very often? No. Can we? Yes. If it's something that was going to be sustained, we probably would. Short-term things, we've just found it to be more effective ways. I think that the technology that a lot of people don't remember is for, by and large for us, our fire alarm systems are voice systems. So there's that fun little walkie-talkie on it that you may have noticed at your fire panel, where you can actually broadcast announcements over it. That is our most underutilized method of communicating with our residential students during an issue. So I would highly encourage people to make sure you're utilizing that, and I can talk a little bit about it more later. How do you notify professional staff not on call if they're needed to assist? A regular old phone call or a text message. Either it's a text message that goes out that says all hands on deck, please report here, or it's phone calls. The one I do want to, we have learned as a good lesson learned is sometimes all hands on deck is not the best thing at the time. It's better to pick and choose how many people you need, because there is such thing as having too many people at a scene. The other thing is that a good lesson that we have learned is that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Everybody wants to show up at the beginning. If you had unfortunately a death on campus or something along those lines, the amount of people who show up in the first 4 hours is immense. The care is needed 24 hours later, 48 hours later, 5 days later. That's when we need to make sure our staff support is ongoing. Does that hall director need somebody to step in and take their own call for them? Does that hall director need somebody to come in and help rearrange afternoon conduct hearings because they're just overwhelmed? Those are the ways that we like to remember that we have learned when we have done an all call or things like that. Sometimes too much too soon is not a thing. What is your approach to contacting students who are residents in the hall but not present at the time of the incident? I kind of talked about this one. The best thing that we did was, as I said, when we had that flood, was using the existing channels that our RAs are using, which are typically GroupMe or WhatsApp, and choosing to go to email. Why email? You may say, well, why didn't you keep text messaging them? One, text is limiting as far as the number of characters that you can get. So you can put a lot more detail in the email. Two, the emails are a lot easier for them to send to their parents to help answer all of those parent concerns that are happening. It just made our lives a lot easier. So that's typically what we've done as far as our reach out has gone. We have had to use social media before and other different pieces like that. We have a very popular Twitter handle for our emergency management at the university. He has over 30,000 followers. The best way to get people to follow your Twitter handle is to be the person who announces when school is canceled because of weather. That place, because boy does everybody want to follow you. But we've also utilized that to get students to draw their attention to the appropriate place.
And then Stacey, we had a question from the field. Come back. So the follow-up question was, have you seen phone trees be effective notifying staff not on call?
Yes, I don't want to know because we have a 24-hour service who completely relies upon phone trees for activating different people, and they have definitely been effective for them as far as knowing when you can't get a hold of the first person, who's the next person to go to. I do think that it, depending upon how your organization is able to be laid out, that phone trees can be effective. I do think the thing that concerns me most when I see a phone tree that has a lot of different levels in it is like the telephone game. So what is the message you gave the first person and what does it look like 5 people down? So sometimes group text is, with the way that we have kind of moved our society and our technology, I will tend to go to that, just direct people specifically like that. I will send it to 5 people and say, here are the 1 or 2 that I need now, but here is that consistent message to make sure that the details that are coming across are accurate. I think I did that one. Other questions? Other questions?
So that ends all of the formal questions that we had received prior to this. And so now we want to open up for the participants. Were there any questions that might have come up throughout the course of this, like Joshua's question? Or are there things that might not have been discussed that you're dying to know more about? There was a side question about if there's a recording. Yes, there absolutely is a recording of this. And so that will be posted on the GLCUHO website shortly after this webinar ends. And so, Stacey, one of the questions that just came through was, could you repeat some of the listserv ideas that you had mentioned earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a large listserv that is open to anybody with a .edu email address, and that is called Disaster Resilient Universities. The DRU. It's sponsored out of the University of Oregon, who, quite frankly, I'm looking to policies as it relates to emergency management. They're probably one of the biggest leaders in the country. But that is a very helpful listserv that I'm on. I would recommend, if you choose to join it, listen for a bit before you hop on and ask a question. When you have close to 1,000 people on an email listserv, some people tend to be a little testy. But it's a great way for me to learn about bigger emergency notification pieces. Sometimes people stray off a little bit of emergency management, as cameras is a hot topic right now. As well. So that's one thing that we use. And then I am a member of IAM and the University and College Caucus. And if you have a role in your for safety in your organization, I would highly encourage you to take a look at IAM. Determine it does require membership in the organization in order to be a member of that caucus. But it is a highly active group, smaller group, much more focused, and there's a lot of good learning opportunities out there. Just listen to a great presentation from John Summit from Indiana University on student protests on campus and teams dedicated to helping to support those.
All right. The next question that came in, do you typically evacuate residential buildings for bomb explosion threats? If so, what systems do you use to evacuate and track which rooms have been evacuated?
Great question. So usually is a really weird term for us. So for us, our fire department is the bomb squad. Sometimes some other jurisdictions are going to do as a part of the police department. So the Columbus Fire Department is ultimately going to make the call as to whether or not going to evacuate. So that's why I said the usually piece is a little weird. It is completely going to defer to them. Things that I have noticed in my years. We tend to evacuate buildings or areas more if there has something high profile that has happened in the news, and we are now dealing with this package. Great example, Boston Marathon bombing. About 3 days after that, we had a student that left a backpack on the plaza outside of our student union. In general, my gut opinion, a year from then, if somebody had seen a backpack on our student union plaza, a lot of people probably just would have and somebody called the police, so I would have walked up to it and taken a look inside. 3 days after Boston bombing, not so much. So it does kind of depend, in my experience, based upon what's been going on. Also, what level of appetite your jurisdiction is going to have that risk. The instructions we give to hall staff for anything having to do with threats and suspicious packages. And the thing that I would encourage you to think about as residence life professionals is bomb threats are kind of the way of the past. The more common threat that we see that are going to be called in is the threat of an act of violence. So I try, when I talk about it, I will talk about bomb threats, but I also make sure to talk about threats of acts of violence. We have had people who have just called in and said, I'm going to do X. So I try to make sure we're staying a little bit more broad as we're talking about that. But we follow their direction. How do we make sure rooms clear? That is typically going to be a police officer with somebody from staff. Never a student, always a professional staff member, and that could be based upon the size of the building. That could be a couple of, that could be a hall director, an assistant hall, it could be maintenance, but with master keys, and they will go room to room. We will facilitate the access, and they typically peek in. It will say it's dependent upon a few different aspects as far as what we've had, but that's typically what we've done. We've also been asked to do it where there's staff involvement, and the police have just done it, and we've turned over everything to them.
Thank you, Stacey. Are there any other questions from the attendees that you'd like answered? Okay. And so if you have questions that pop up after this, or for those that are going to be listening to this webinar after it's live, also keep in mind that Stacey will be at the conference in a couple weeks, and you can ask more questions of her during that session. So as we wrap up, wanted to make a reminder. Don't forget to register to participate in the annual case study competition that will be taking place on Monday, I think it's the 21st, if I remember correctly, but that Monday of the conference. So sign up in pairs. It's going to be a great time just to show your stuff and also to learn a little bit more about emergency preparedness. And then one more time, I wanted to open this up again. Any last minute questions or thoughts?
I'm looking forward to seeing everybody at the conference, and also looking forward to the breakout session where I'll get to talk about a case study around at the university. So very excited.
Absolutely. And on behalf of the Contemporary Issues Committee, Stacey, thank you very much for taking some time out of your Friday to join us today and share a lot of your expertise with the membership. So for all of you attendees, thank you for taking time out of your Friday to learn more and participate. Hopefully you're able to get something out of this. But we look forward to seeing all of you at the conference in a couple weeks. And at this point, I'll turn this over to Jeremy and just to kind of do any other wrap-up points.
Thank you, everybody. The recording of this presentation will be on the GLCUHO website, glcuho.org, and it should go up later this afternoon. Feel free to share with anyone who was not able to attend. And as Jake said earlier, Stacey will be at the annual conference, so looking forward to seeing her presentation there. And you can also sign up for the annual conference if you have not done so at glcuho.org and do your registration. Have a great Friday, have a great weekend, and thank you everybody for spending some time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Goodbye.